Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we start with our today's analysis, we have two important announcements. BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS would be conducting a free IAS workshop exclusively on our BYJU'S Exam Prep application. The topic for discussion would be complete guidance to crack UPSC CSE 2023, and this session will be handled by Sarmat Mehraj sir. Please do tune in on 25th of June 2022 at 6 p.m. exclusively on our BYJU'S Exam Prep application. All that you have to do is download the application, give the necessary details, and you would be able to strategize for your upcoming examination. The next important announcement is in reference to the weekly current affairs explained session. As part of this initiative, our tomorrow's session would be Agnipath scheme. Please do tune in from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. and you will understand everything about this scheme. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the role of caste in economic transformation. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. When we look into the society right now, there are multiple protests that are taking place in multiple parts of the country. What is the protest for? The protest is in reference to the Agnipath scheme. They are not happy with the Agnipath scheme. Then there were people who were agitating against the farm laws as well. They did not like the farm laws introduced by the government and they wanted the government to withdraw this agricultural farm laws as well. Then you have multiple dominant groups in multiple states. Let's say for example the Patels in Gujarat. You also have the Marathas in Maharashtra as well. These people were also asking for the reservation despite being the dominant community in that particular case. Why are these people protesting? What is the issue in India? The issue in India happens to be jobless growth. What is this jobless growth? For the past 2 decades or so, what India is witnessing is a particular phase of economic issue called as the jobless growth. What is this jobless growth? When we speak about the macroeconomic picture, what we have is the growth factor. What India is witnessing after the economic reformation, after the structural change introduced in 1990 was a massive growth factor. We had GDP numbers growing as well, but when you look at the post 1990s, you had the GDP that was growing, you had the growth factor that was affecting the macroeconomic principles as well, but this was not adding enough number of jobs in the economy. So on one side, you had the country's growth which was developing and increasing constantly. This should have also increased the number of jobs as well. But in an unfortunate phase, what India saw was growth on one side. So the growth was increasing, but then the employment was decreasing. So a jobless recovery or a jobless growth is an economic phenomena where the macroeconomy as a whole experiences growth while maintaining or decreasing its level of employment. So in a jobless growth economy, unemployment remains stubbornly high, and at the same time, there is also increasing automation. More works are not added, but instead, for the same work, what you will have is the growth factor, but drop in the employment opportunities. For the last 2 decades or so, what India has been able to see is jobless growth. As a result, the country is improving, the macroeconomics growth are improving, but at the same time, people are not able to get the jobs. Because they are not able to get the jobs, what we have is protests in multiple states in India. So this article also says that apart from the jobless growth, what we can also look at is the direct correlation between the economic transformation and the caste in India. For a particular person, if he has to find a job, if he has to economically empower himself, on one side what we require is the continuous progress of the evolution of the jobs, and at the same time in India, what the author says is that there is an integration between the growth of a person as well as the caste that he is affiliated to. When you consider some of the South Asian countries like Vietnam, or you consider countries like China, what they were able to improvise is on the economic front. They were also able to give jobs to their people as well. But the author says in India, we are able to develop, but at the same time, we are not able to create such type of structure in India, primarily because of the close affiliation of what is called as economic integration with the caste affiliation. So the author goes on to say, in Indian society, what we have is a rigid social control, and network facilitates economic mobility, which is directly connected to the caste in India. So the author here brings into picture three important parameters. When we speak about economic empowerment, how does a person economically empower himself? One, he needs to have the capital goods. Let's say, for example, land is one of the capital goods. If a person possesses large swathes of land, he would be able to empower himself. So the first key parameter to economically empower himself happens to be ownership and land, which has to be present. But in India, what we have is ownership and land inequality related to productivity failure within the farm sector. So the first important factor for a person to empower himself economically, what he requires is the land, but this land that we have is concentrated with the few castes, which is why people are not able to empower, is the first concern. The second concern is elite bias in the higher education and historical neglect of the mass education. What exactly is happening in this particular case as well? When you consider the historical injustice, there are a certain section of the people, so-called upper caste, who are able to capture the educational framework. It is these upper caste or few elites who were able to capture the education sector. They were getting educated and they were able to pass on to the future generations. So what we have is less number of people who are educated, and these educated once again were highly restricted to a specific caste, which is why the other section of the people are not able to empower themselves. The author, in order to substantiate the first parameter and the second parameter, quotes some of the international authors. With respect to the land, the author says Arthur Lewis, who happens to be a Nobel Prize winner for development economics, emphasized accumulation of physical capital for economic transformation in the developing world. Only when you are able to have the physical capital, which is in the form of land or any other physical capital, you would be able to economically empower yourself in the developing world. So if there is no physical capacity, if they do not have the capacity to hold the land, in that particular case, they will be the major sufferers. First problem. Second, he says Theodore William, an American economist, underscored the need for human capital for better transition to modern sectors. For him, an educated workplace enhances productivity, while entrepreneurship ability is increased through education, training, experience, and so on. If education is not provided, if training is not provided, if experience is not provided to such a person, he may also not be able to empower himself economically. The third parameter, he says, is caste-based entry barriers and exclusive networks in the modern sector. Let's understand each of these parameters in a greater detail. First, when we look into the first parameter, the author speaks about the land ownership. India has the highest land inequalities in the world today. Unequal distribution of land was perpetuated by the British colonial intervention that legalized a traditional disparity. When you look into the hierarchical sector in India, you have the so-called upper caste, you have the so-called lower caste. When you consider during the British period, you have the upper caste who were able to control large swathes of land. It is these people who are further able to keep up to these land, which acted as a capital incentive for them. But even after the independence as well, the so-called upper caste continued to have large swathes of land. So this particular idea that the upper caste should have large swathes of land was present during the British period. The British period wanted to divide the people as well, so they further continued this old legacy. So the upper caste continued to have more land, the lower caste did not have much land, and even after independence we had land reforms that took place. Even after the land reforms that was initiated by the government of India, the so-called lower caste did not get much of the land, is the first major issue. But if you consider juxtapose the South Asian countries along with India, the Southeast Asian countries were able to give what is called as land reformation. You consider China, you consider Vietnam, you consider many other Southeast Asian countries, they were able to bring land reforms and actually give away land, distribute the land to the people in their country. But when it comes to India, despite the system existing in India before the independence and even after independence, it continued to perpetuate disparity in the system. Then we had the Green Revolution as well. Green Revolution was further supposed to have reduced this disparity in the economic system. Even that did not help. It is the farmers who were holding large weights of land. They became capitalistic in nature. Farmer capitalism started, and these people from the lower rank caste were not able to get any land as well. So Green Revolution in itself was not able to reform the agricultural sector, and at the same time lands was consolidated within few castes in the society, which is why people are now asking for the reservation. Why are they asking for the reservation? If you consider some of the castes, let's say the Patels in Gujarat, let's say for example you have the Marathas in Maharashtra, or any of the dominant castes, they are asking for reservation. Why? That is because if you consider the Green Revolution, yes, it did have a larger impact on the agricultural sector, but after this impact the soil fertility started decreasing as well, and at the same time these people, because they had huge swathes of land, they did not develop any entrepreneurship skills as well, they did not educate themselves as well. But over a period of time, from the agriculture sector after 1990, what we shifted is to the service sector. India was no more an agricultural country. Instead of shifting slowly from the agriculture sector to the manufacturing sector and to the service sector, India took a jump from the agriculture sector to the service sector. So all those people who held large weights of land, because the soil fertility was decreasing, because they were not able to make changes, because they did not have the entrepreneurship skills as well, these people were least interested in the agriculture sector, and agriculture sector was not giving them enough profits as well, which is why these people say that we want the reservation so that we would be able to take up government jobs, because some of the people did not have the entrepreneurship skills, because they did not expand themselves to get that educational horizon. Because of all these issues, they ultimately want reservation is the first major issue. Since land lost its productivity post the 1990, the farm lobby was not able to capitalize itself except for a few castes in western and southern India, and because these masses historically neglected the education, they now want to enter into the government so that if this reservation is provided, they can economically empower themselves. They are asking for reservation because agriculture is not giving them the returns that they expected. The second concern is in reference to the neglect of education. If strong growth in productivity within the farm sector is crucial for sustained economic growth, an educated workforce is equally necessary to move to the modern sectors. India failed on both accounts. The Indian education system has been suffering from an elite bias since the colonial times. British colonials educated tiny group of elites, largely from upper caste, for their own administrative purposes. Apart from the land consolidation that few castes had, education also became a major hindrance for many of the lower castes. The so-called lower castes were not able to educate themselves. Why? One, because of the British policy of divide and rule, and at the same time they only wanted to teach few elites as well, and when they picked up these elites, they only selected those men from the upper caste, and the lower caste again suffered as well. On one side, if you consider the Southeast Asian countries, what they had is a gradual transformation from the agriculture sector to the manufacturing sector. So if people started moving from agriculture to the manufacturing, all these people were also provided education so that they could have empowered themselves economically. But in India, the problem is we shifted from agriculture to the service sector. So most of the people who did not have any educational base, who did not have lands, were not skilled. They were not able to get jobs in the service sector, and as a result, what we have is people who were not given the education once again suffered. On one side, they did not have the land. On the other side, they did not have the education, which is why these people are the major sufferers, is the second major concern. The third is in reference to the most important factor, which is barrier to entrepreneurship. Caste-shaped policy outcomes, including India's high unequal land reform and lack of public provision of education and health, which in turn erected barriers to economic diversification. Castes also worked in building social networks. Castes that were already in control of trading and industrial spaces resisted the entry of others. What do we mean by it? In India, we know for the fact that caste is not given as a sign of merit, but this is given by the birth. So if a person from a different community want to establish contacts, if a person from a different community want to expand on his economic horizons, it will be tough. That is because you have a particular caste caste which is already engaged in trading, it is already engaged in the industrial areas, so it knows how to work and move in that particular direction. So they've already established contacts as well, they've already established the structure as well. So if a new person wants to enter into this trading, the caste people will not allow, and what they will lay is the hindrances and obstacles to a person from a different community. So the major factor as to why we have issues in India right now is because of the jobless growth, and this jobless growth has three important parameters according to the author. One is in reference to the land ownership, second is in reference to the education, third is in reference to the caste barriers. All this means that people are not able to get enough number of jobs, they are not able to economically empower themselves, which is ultimately leading to the discrepancies in the society. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says towards a single low tax regime. This article here is speaking about the goods and the services tax. When we speak about the goods and the services tax, this was assumed to be one of the important initiatives taken by the government. The minute the GST came into picture, people were so happy because there were cascading effect in the earlier regime. People were paying taxes to the central government, people were also paying taxes to the state governments as well, they were also paying taxes twice for the same commodity as well. This ultimately meant that the product's price was exorbitant and people were not able to question the government. In order to overcome this particular issue, in order to prevent the cascading effect, the government came up with the introduction of the GST, or the goods and the services tax. So the minute the goods and the services tax was introduced, it was expected that all the issues and concerns and the fears that were existing in the previous regime would be ultimately addressed, and over a period of time what we would have is a transparent tax regime. But of late there are issues and concerns with respect to the GST. What is it? One is the complicated structure with respect to the GST. We have discussed this in the past as well. The GST has become so complicated that people are not able to understand what is this GST all about. Instead of actually reducing the complications, it has further increased the complications, and at the same time the major problem happens to be in terms of the slabs. What do we mean by the slabs? We have 0%, we have 12%, we have 18%, we have 28% for the so-called sin goods. So the government is making sure that all these slabs are present. There are products and goods that are added in one of these slabs. It can be 0%, it can be 12%, it can be 18%, it can be 28%. So the author in this particular case says that instead of having so many slabs which is complicating the tax structure, what the government has to do is rethink about this entire tax structure and ultimately make sure that we have a single tax structure, or simplest of this tax structure, or have very minimal slab rates. In fact, the author also goes on to say that we have 28% taxes as well. These are imposed on some of the sin goods as well as the luxury goods as well. This should be completely avoided because there are ripple effects that could happen, says the author. So the author introduces what is called as the KISS model, or keep it simple stupid model is what the author calls. The author takes into picture number of examples. The first the author takes into picture is the complex and the confusing GST. The GST system is a complicated tax regime with different slabs. It is not easy to comprehend or comply with all these slabs. Also, the addition of more categories every day and the need to categorize them under differential tax slabs in the GST regime is open to interpretation, harassment and avoidable legislation, and this goes against the spirit of ease of doing business in India. What do we understand by this? So as we initially discussed, whatever GST structure should have been simplified. This should have made sure that people are paying the taxes on time, but people are not able to pay the taxes, and even if they pay taxes, there is the conflict between the people who pay the taxes as well as the tax authority, ultimately violating the ease of doing business in India. So the first major concern the author takes into picture is the complex structure and the slab system that we have in the GST. That's the first major issue. The second major issue is in terms of higher taxes on some segments. The imposition of high GST rates, often referred to as sin taxes in some areas, is not in the interest of sustainable economic growth and development. The higher taxes on five-star hotels, automobiles fail to comprehend the effect that these segments could have on employment generation, both direct and indirect, and the economic ripple effect downstream is a complex web of business that can also have symbiotic relationship. What do we understand by this? Let me explain this. Let's say we have a five-star hotel. What happens in a five-star hotel? The government is imposing, as of now, let's say 28% of taxation. But the author in this particular case says that this is wrong policy introduced by the government. Why? If the government is introducing about 28%, yes, people may go there and they may pay taxes as well, but over a period of time, let's say hypothetically, people do not go. If they do not go to these hotels which is currently being imposed with 28%, they may opt for other hotels as well. If they do not go to these five-star hotels, how will it impact the people? There are number of people who are recruited and employed in the five-star hotel. You have the chefs, you also have the waiters as well, you also have the security as well, and at the same time, it is not only these people who are employed, but the five-star hotels also buy the products as well. They also buy the furnitures as well. They also buy the clothing and the bed sheets, so on and so forth. And at the same time, they also have a direct link with the farmers where they are able to procure the food items. If you are imposing 28% taxation and if people are not ready to go to the five-star hotels, what will be the problem? All these people will suffer. It is the employees who will suffer. It is also the other growth factors like the other industries which will also suffer, because the five-star hotels will stop buying all these furnitures and so on and so forth, and at the same time the farmers will also suffer. So imposing 28% is not good, says the author. And at the same time, the author also says we have some of the luxury automobiles. Let's say for example the high-end cars. In for all these high-end cars, what we have is the 28% taxation. The author in this particular case also says that this is a problematic area. For the rich people, they may be able to buy it, but if the so-called middle class aspire to buy these automobiles, they would not be able to buy them because the government is imposing 28% taxation, and ultimately all these people who aspire to buy such automobiles or the cars will not be able to buy them. And automobile industry is what keeps running the economy. It also provides job opportunities and employment working in that sector. So if more people do not buy the automobiles at the higher cost, this is again bound to have ripple effect, says the author. Hence, such taxes might be contradictory to the government's policy of generating growth and creating jobs under Make in India. A moderate tax rate is the recommendation that the author says for these segments can spur their demand in the economy and the result in a virtuous impact on economic growth and development. So you impose the taxes, no doubt about it, but imposing such high rates on these people will not serve the purpose, is the second obstacle. The third is in reference to exemptions from GST. Some items continue to remain exempt from GST. Petrol, diesel, aviation turbine fuel are not under the purview of GST but come under the central excise and state taxes. So if we are speaking about the petrol, you have the central government which is still able to impose the central excise duty, and you also have the state government which is still able to impose the state taxes as well. And this means that the petrol that people are buying will be comparatively more. So the author says that if you have such things which are exempted from the GST structure, again the people might be the major sufferers. So bring about a massive transformation in this particular area so that more issues do not occur when it comes to the slab structure in India. As of now, there are many items which are pushed into 28%. There are large many slabs as well. So come up with a moderate tax regime and ensure the sin goods or imposition of taxes on such sin goods is ultimately taken off, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says crypto came tumbling after. The article here is speaking about the cryptocurrencies. In this article, we will not explain what the cryptocurrencies, what are its advantages, what are its disadvantages. Kindly look into the video which we have discussed recently as part of our knowledge series. So what is this cryptocurrency will not be discussed. The article here only speaks about whether there is future for the cryptocurrency. Will cryptocurrency have any future? The author says yes, cryptocurrency will have the future. As of now, there is drop in the cryptocurrencies. The Bitcoin, which was at about 51 lakhs during the COVID-19 period, is currently wavering at around 17 lakhs. You have number of other coins like Ethereum, which was about 3.5 lakhs during the COVID-19, is currently at about 80,000, 90,000, so on and so forth. And you have Litecoin, which was supposed to have been 15,000 during the COVID-19. It is currently wavering at around 3,000, 4,000 and 5,000. So is it the end of the cryptocurrency? No, says the author. The first question that the author answers is, why did the price of these bitcoins or the ethereums or the cryptocurrency increase during the COVID-19 period? That is because during the COVID-19 period, what happened? People were all stuck at their homes. They did not have any avenues to explore as well. They could not have invested in the real estate because the real estate was not doing good. They did not have other avenues of investment as well. So either they could have invested on the stock market or they could have invested on the cryptocurrency. They would have already invested enough during the stock market. So to explore another option, what they started exploring was the cryptocurrency. So during the COVID-19 period, the prices of all these assets increased. That is, the prices of cryptocurrency increased because people started exploring other options because there was no normalcy. So they started investing on these cryptocurrencies, which is why they increase, says the author. This is the first point. The second is in reference to the globalization effect. In an influential paper published in 2017, Ricardo Cabello and Emmanuel defined a safe asset as a simple debt instrument that is expected to preserve its value during adverse systemic events. So in case there is a recession or there is an economic turmoil, what is a safe asset? In all these cases, if a particular asset is able to generate some value, give you some returns, that will be called as the safe asset. Is cryptocurrency a safe asset? It depends on time, says the author. We are all in an integrated world. How does this impact us? Russia started invading Ukraine. So obviously because of it, inflation started increasing, and because of inflation started increasing, government had to take control over it. So what did United States of America do? It started increasing the interest rates as well. And once they started increasing the interest rate, what we also saw was bloodbath in the stock market as well. So you cannot blame the cryptocurrencies alone. Even the stock markets have been hit. So this is not the end of the cryptocurrencies, because when we have a global effect, it will not only hit them, but it will also hit the stock market is another way. So the author goes on to conclude that cryptocurrency is here to stay and it will continue to stay as well until we have a new innovative asset where people will want to invest on that particular asset. Now let's look into the next article. This article says golden era of Santhal tribe in India, now say the community leaders. The article here is important from the preliminary examination point of view as it speaks about the Santhal tribe. The NDA or the National Democratic Alliance has chosen Murmu as their presidential candidate for the upcoming elections. She comes from the Santhal tribe. So it is in this particular backdrop we have to understand some of the important factual data with respect to the Santhal tribe. The word Santhal is derived from two words, Santa meaning calm and peaceful, and Allah meaning man. Santhals are the third largest scheduled tribe community in India after the Gonds and the Bhils, and their population is mostly distributed in Odisha, Jharkhand and West Bengal. Santhal speak Santali, which also is a dialect of Kherwari, which belongs to the Austro-Asiatic language family, and Santhals have their own script called as Walchiki. Their primary profession happens to be agriculture. However, they've also started shifting to other jobs as well, like coal mining, laboring, so on and so forth. One of the unique rules that community follows is that women are not allowed to weep or mourn when someone passes away or while they are pregnant, and their husbands are also not allowed to take part in their funeral procession as well. Do note that Draupadi Murmu's home district happens to be Mayurbhanj, and this happens to be densely resided by the Santhali people. And as part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section. There is one of the important minerals that is present in the Mayurbhanj region. Which is this mineral? Please put it on the comment section. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says digital wearables can expose users to cyber attacks, says IEEE. The article goes on to say that digital wearables, smartwatches, and fitness trackers pose unique threats to the security and privacy of the customer data. And in the near future, people may also hack into these devices as well. They would be able to extract the information, and this information can be shared with multiple other companies as well. And ultimately, what you would be able to get is the information. And since data is the new fuel, this data can ultimately be captured by the hackers, and ultimately it can be sold to the companies who work on data processing. So this article says that if you look at computers, they do have some security as well, but when it comes to these types of wearables, they do not have much of security. So there can be threat to these wearables in the near future, says this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Castes in India play a significant role in economic transformation. Analyze. Next question. GST, which was supposed to have simplified the tax regime, has instead complicated it with different tax slabs. Discuss. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.